Have you ever had someone ask you something that was so personal, so private, so completely not their business that you couldn't help but snap back with this response? That's none of your business. None of your business. Maybe someone you barely know asked you about your crush. None of their business, right? Or maybe you overheard someone sharing a rumor that's going around. Also, none of their business. Maybe your parents wanted to read through your text, or your siblings read through your DMs. That definitely feels like that's none of their business. I remember this one time, me and my buddy Terrence, we liked the same girl, and she ended up liking me, of course. And we actually wanted to go to the arcade together this one time. As I'm getting ready to go to the arcade, I'm getting my best outfit on, all of those things. And then Terrence gives me a phone call. He calls me and says, "Hey, let's hang out tonight. What are you doing?" And this was a moment when I told him, because I didn't want him to know I was hanging out with the girl, that's none of your business. For the next 4 weeks, we're gonna talk about one of those things that might make you wanna say, that's none of your business. And honestly, it's something that shouldn't be everybody's business. It's something that's personal and private and important for you to choose carefully who you talk with about it. But while it shouldn't be everybody's business, it should definitely be somebody's business because it has the potential to be a really big deal in your life. The topic is sex. That's right. For the next 4 weeks here at church, we're going to talk about sex. It's probably going to make you laugh. It might even make you feel a little bit uncomfortable, but it's also definitely going to make you think. And the good news is that any of those responses are totally okay and totally normal. Let's just be honest. The topic of sex can be pretty awkward. It almost feels like it should be off limits, like it should be nobody's business. And it definitely feels like something that we shouldn't talk about at church. But here's the deal. I think church should be the safest place in the world to talk about anything, including the topic of sex. Your friends are definitely talking about it, joking about it, even experimenting with it. But your friends might not have all the answers to your questions, do they? That's why we want to give you a safe place to talk about and ask questions about sex. It doesn't have to be everybody's business, but we do want it to be somebody's business. Somebody who's older and wiser and someone you can trust. I could actually read some of your minds right now. You're thinking, okay, so we're talking about sex at church. Here comes the part where they tell me it's bad and sinful and that I'm too young to be talking about it and I need to stay away from it. And if you're thinking that right now, I understand why. When it comes to talking about sex, a lot of people usually do one of two things. They either ignore the conversation at all costs, which isn't healthy or helpful, or they talk about it in a way that makes it seem negative, a way that makes it seem like you should feel awful for even wondering about it. Here's something we know for certain. God created sex, and God made sex a good thing. He's not embarrassed, uncomfortable, or grossed out by it. That tells us that when we have sexual thoughts, desires, and questions, we're normal. God designed that part of us just like He designed the rest of us. What I'm trying to say is that sex is something He designed for us to experience. But here's where it gets confusing. If sex is designed by God and is good, then why do we hear so many negative things about it? Why do we feel weird or ashamed or scared to even ask about it sometimes? Why does it make us uncomfortable? And what's the right way to talk about it? The Bible actually has a lot to say about sex. Yeah, you heard that right. The first time we get an idea of God's attitude towards sex is at the very beginning of the Bible in the book of Genesis. There we read about the beginning, the creation of all things. So God created human beings in His own image. In the image of God, He created them. Male and female, He created them. Then God blessed them and said, "Be fruitful and multiply." When God told the people He created to be fruitful and multiply, He was telling them to have babies. And how are babies made? Basically, God created people and then told them to have sex. So here's what we can learn from this passage. God invented sex, and it was His plan from the very beginning. There was nothing wrong or bad or shameful about it. It wasn't sinful, it wasn't gross, it was a part of God's plan. In fact, as we read through the book of Genesis, we find an even bigger picture of God's plan for sex. Let's take a look. Adam and his wife were both naked, and they felt no shame. So what happened? There was a fruit on a certain tree that God told Adam and Eve not to eat, but they gave into temptation and ate it anyway. And the way they saw themselves and each other all changed. The book of Genesis says that Adam and Eve's eyes were opened. They realized they were naked and covered themselves up. Just like that, sex and the way we view our bodies changed forever. That doesn't mean we're all doomed when it comes to how we view our bodies and sex. It just means that we're always going to have to fight things like shame and feeling uncomfortable when it comes to sex. It also means that when we treat sex and our bodies in a way that doesn't follow God's plan for them, there are some serious consequences. Now, we already said that God created sex and that it's good. When we use it in the way God planned, it's a great thing. Within the commitment of marriage, sex isn't shameful or wrong. It's how God planned for it to be. I want to show you something. Anyone have one of these in your house? And if you didn't know, this is a fireplace, all right? But when a fire is in a fireplace, it's contained and safe. We know how to take care of it, and we know how to use it. It gives us the right amount of warmth to fend off the cold. It's the perfect place to make the perfect s'more. And also, when the power goes out, it's a really good source of light. Sounds pretty great, right? The fire is awesome, right? Well, yeah, that's because the fire is contained in a fireplace in your home. That's how it's designed to be used. But what about when a fire starts accidentally in your house? It can get big and dangerous really fast. When a fire rages through your home, it's totally unpredictable. Instead of perfect s'mores, it leaves you with major home damage. It causes you so many unintentional negative results when it goes outside of the safety of the fireplace, when it stops being used how it was intended to be used. Now, outside of God's plan, sex can impact your life in the same way. It can get out of control really quickly and be totally unpredictable. It can cause a lot of pain for yourself and others, both now and in the future. It can result in outcomes that you didn't imagine or intend. Those consequences can hurt us physically, like with sexually transmitted infections. They can hurt us emotionally, like making us feel that our worth is attached to sex. These consequences can even hurt others if we use sex as a way to get someone to do what we want. Don't forget, God invented sex and it's good. It was created for two people who have committed to live their lives together in the context of marriage. Let's read one more passage from Genesis to get a little more insight into how God created sex. This explains why a man leaves his father and mother and is joined to his wife, and the two are united into one. Here we read that sex is powerful, so powerful that a man is to be joined to his wife and the two are united into one. This doesn't just mean sexually. It means the joining of two lives physically and emotionally. It means creating a connection that affects every part of you and every part of the other person as well. So basically, when you have sex, you're joining yourself to another person in every way possible. That's pretty powerful. You see, there's a power when two people join as one, and that power can either be really good or it can result in really negative consequences. It all depends on the context. When sex occurs in the right context, it has the power to be something incredibly good, just like the fire in the fireplace we talked about earlier. But when sex occurs outside of God's design, it has incredible power to negatively impact you and others, just like a fire that rages through your home. Sex is good and sex is powerful. Maybe you know that because you've seen it. You've experienced the physical, spiritual, and emotional hurt that comes from sex outside of God's plan. Maybe you've seen it ruin your relationship with a boyfriend or girlfriend. Maybe you've seen it damage relationships with friends or between parents or even between God. Or maybe you've been sexually abused or harassed and it has left you feeling all kinds of things that you know God doesn't want you to experience. Now let me pause here and tell you that if you've been mistreated sexually, it is not your fault. God didn't intend for you to be hurt this way. And that's not his plan for sex. He loves you, doesn't judge you, and wants what's best for your life. I encourage you to speak to your small group leader today to help you navigate through your experiences. Now, maybe you haven't experienced the emotional, physical, and spiritual effects that sex has outside of marriage that it can potentially cause. Maybe you or your friends are experimenting with sexual acts outside of God's design, but those consequences you hear everyone talking about haven't really happened. You may not see the negative impact yet, but trust me when I tell you that the negative potential is there. Sex is so powerful that even when you can't see the consequences of using it outside of God's plan, or even if you didn't see them for years to come, they're still there. The emotional, spiritual, and physical impact can last a lifetime. And those hurts can affect your current and future relationships in a lot of negative ways. They have the potential to bring pain into the most important relationships in your life. But pain isn't what God wants for you in any area of life. But that's true especially when it comes to sex. God has a plan for your life, a good plan. And when we trust in and follow His design for all things in our lives, including sex, we can know that we're using the things He created for us in the best way possible. Remember, sex is good and sex is powerful. I believe that's true, and I want you to believe it too. To help you start navigating this topic in a way that's good for you, here are 2 things I hope you'll think about doing this week. Number 1, find someone to talk to about sex. We want each one of you to develop a healthy attitude towards sex. We want to give you a place to talk about it with people who actually care about you. Is it a conversation for you to have with everybody? No. Remember, when it comes to your life, sex isn't everybody's business, but it needs to be somebody's business. So find somebody who loves you, who wants what's best for you, and who will encourage you in this particular area of your life. Somebody like a small group leader, a parent, or an older sibling. Now, secondly, here's what I want you to do this week. Be brave enough to start talking. I understand that talking about sex isn't going to be easy. No matter where you're coming from on this topic, it probably feels like the conversation will be awkward or uncomfortable or embarrassing. But when you take the brave step to talk to the right person, it doesn't have to be. Once you can identify someone who can give you guidance and wisdom and who isn't afraid of your honesty or your questions, start talking to them. Will it be awkward sometimes? Probably. Will it make you laugh? Probably. All that's okay. My hope is that you'll move past the awkwardness because this conversation is that important. Believe it or not, we want you to experience everything that God has created and designed for you to enjoy when it comes to this topic. But we also know that in order to live the life that God has for each of us, we've got to pay attention to what God says about it. We have to remember that sex is good and sex is powerful. And as you head out today, I want you to think about this question. Who is one trusted person I can talk to when it comes to sex? Whew. We did it. We made it through a whole conversation about sex at church. Thanks for sticking with me through this important talk.